I don't think so.
Don't think it is.
Oh.
What are you taking?
I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm putting forms to take because most of them are registered for. So hopefully contract drafting, environmental litigation drafting, will clinic, and independent study, and law practice.
What's going to be your independent study? What are you thinking?
I talked about it. See if I can get a professor to writing a paper on the pipeline.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I did an independent study. It was marvelous.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you do for it?
Hegelian dialectics.
So you did a paper?
Yeah.
Like the one that you're
Apparently you can you can just read books. Professor Snyder told me you can read a lot of books. You need to show that you've read them and have discussions with the professor about what you read.
Well, here's the thing. I would basically be getting
One credit.
I'm doing this pro bono work for employees for this Big Bang pipeline case that they have going on.
Oh, really? Cool.
But I'm interviewing some other professionals surrounding it, but coming in as a professor that's dealing with the case is not going to, he's not full-time, he's here, so he couldn't be my supervisor for it, he would have to act like maybe Warren.
Yeah.
For Warren.
So I'm guessing you've done your pro bono hours. Okay.
But I'd still be fine with doing the pro bono. I just need those hours.
Okay.
I'd like to take Will's clinic, but I have that 3 hours and it's only 2, so.
It's interesting, yeah. I guess you'll.
Bankruptcy, huh? I can't because I'm doing larvae stuff over winter and XC stuff. I have to catch up on a bunch of stuff.
Did you talk to Warren today?
No.
See the email?
I saw the email,
I was
but I
gone.
didn't see Grace. Did you see Grace?
I talked to her and I
It was very nice.
Thank you.
No. Are you still working in
How's
Yeah,
it going?
because it's
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, they said they'll all be happy. They were waiting for
Not directly.
petition or whatever the process is going through.
But I love
So
HUD,
the
and I think they
assumption
do
is I
have a
didn't
really good
ask her
mission.
outright because it
Help
was,
people.
I don't know, seemed appropriate.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't think that they would have gone for all that and given us the details. Doesn't quite make sense. And the fact that I'm pretty sure Gloria is the one that does all that stuff. And what's going on right now? She probably swans. I haven't seen her in like 2 days.
All right. Well, here we are. We're not here. We are here. So sorry about that. I hope I didn't ruin everyone's weekend by telling you that we were going to have class tonight. And as I told my day class, 1 or 2 of you were in my day class also. It looks like I am actually going to have to miss a class after all, and I think it's going to be the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, which, I know you're pressed about that. I am too. So what I'll end up, I'll confirm that by the end of the week, and I'll let you know. And then what I will do is, yes, there'll be a video makeup. You won't have to come in. I'll do that video after all the next week or 2, and I'll figure out, kind of try to estimate where I think we're going to be. And it'll be the last class. It was going to be the last class anyway, but it'll be that as well. So that's that, and I'll just post it then, like before Thanksgiving. We'll finish class that Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and then I'll post it, or maybe I'll even post it that Monday, Tuesday before we have class. And we'll have a couple weeks of work. So that's that, and so tonight we're doing conditional revocation on page 196 of the casebook. And we're going to spend most of the time on conditional revocation, the implied conditional revocation. So what I want to do is just say there's one short paragraph about express conditional revocation. I want to say literally 1 or 2 things about that. Then I am going to be thinking of this. Then I'm going to ask you, then our pop quiz is for you to take 60 seconds. Don't do it yet. Okay, so we give you a head start by talking about express conditional revocation. The pop quiz will be for you to take 60 seconds to write down your understanding of the implied conditional revocation. But first, here goes express conditional revocation, page 196 in the casebook. It's very rare, express conditional revocation, but the testator expressly states in the revoking instrument that the will is to be revoked only if something happens, only if the condition happens, only if an event happens. And again, it's rare and it's used by a testator who has very unusual needs or in a very unusual situation. I won't test you about express conditional revocations. I've just never seen it, frankly. It's just very, very rare. Now, implied conditional revocation. It's also known, perhaps more commonly and very confusingly, as the doctrine of dependent relative revocation. Okay? It's implied conditional revocation. Those are the abbreviations of this or this. And take 60 seconds and tell me what it is. Write it down. What do you think it is? What do you understand? Implied conditional revocation, also known as dependent relative revocation. That's the term I use more often. What is it? All right, time's up. Just a sentence or two. Who can tell me, but not just me, why don't you tell Jennifer Kelly as well, me and Jennifer Kelly, and maybe Joe Spurlock back there as well. Tell us what implied conditional revocation is. What do you understand? Who wants to, and tell the rest of the class too while you're at it. Who wants to tell us all what your understanding of implied conditional revocation is? Okay. Ms. Moses?
I will try.
Please, thank you.
Very eloquent.
That's okay, that's all right.
So my understanding is that the doctrine applies when you have a will and then you revoke it with an instrument and you think the revocation is valid, but it's not either due to mistake law or mistake fact. And so the doctrine applies and assuming that that revocation hasn't occurred, so whatever the first will was still being applied.
And would still be admissible program. You're very close. I mean, I give you about 80 to 90%. I mean, you're pretty darn close. It's, all right. If everyone here is amazing. Yes, okay. Can anyone guess what I'm thinking? No. Can anyone guess what? She's 80 to 90% there. Can anyone just put the finishing touches on it? It's not that the second instrument revoking the will isn't valid. That's what the case was saying. And because that instrument wasn't valid, they didn't have to depend on the revocation or apply the revocation in the case. But close. I mean, that you pretty much gave me the facts of the case. The legal facts of the case. I mean, very, very close. All right, let's let it stand, and we'll just see as we go through the case, we'll see kind of the finishing touches. All right, so that's great. Thank you for the effort, and as I say, I give you anything for the effort. Thank you very much. All right, let's talk about this case. The Burton versus Bell case on page 196 of the casebook. Notice again, this is a common law doctrine. Many of these doctrines that we're covering now are common law doctrines and not statutory doctrines. This isn't the statute anywhere. And what happened in the case, and it's very much like Ms. Macy just said. I mean, that basically is what happened. What were the specifics? Do you want to do that? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the case, and then we'll talk about what they didn't have to reach, or why they didn't have to reach the
Okay, so testator in this case executed a valid will in his sister as the plaintiff said. After testator's death, a holographic instrument was found. It wasn't dated, it wasn't
to be signed. Okay. And what was the authority for that statement? You remember, bottom of page 197. They said that would be sufficient. Just the fact that he wrote his name kind of in the heading or at the top, didn't sign it at the end, and a holographic instrument, that would be sufficient. It's talked about in class earlier. Lawson versus Dawson's estate. Exactly right. And it was on page 123 of the case. We saw that. Pretty liberal definition of what a signature is. Okay. The court noted that was not signed at the end, but it's not dated, this instrument. And there it is on page 197, last will and testament of Roy Wheeler Bell. This guy was simply looking at a form of some kind, and he didn't know what he was doing. I think that's pretty clear, and I think what the court was doing in this case was straining not to have him die intestate. They could have applied DRR as well. This was undated. Is it clear, though, that this instrument on 197 was, page 197, was subsequent in time to the will? What was the date of the will? Recall? 1948, exactly right. And what about this instrument? It wasn't dated, but it's clear it's got to be after what date? He was married. It was after January 1st of 55 because he says January 1st of 1955 in that document. So clearly it was a subsequent document. And if that document were valid as a will to revoke his, or as a revoking instrument, as a subsequent revoking instrument, if that were valid and admissible to probate, then the 1948 will would have been validly revoked. And if it had been validly revoked, how would testator die? Did this thing on 197, did this make any testamentary dispositions? It did. That's what the court said. It didn't make any testamentary dispositions, so it wasn't written with testamentary intent. And because it wasn't written with testamentary intent, was it admissible as a will or as a revoking instrument? It was totally invalid, said the court. And because it was totally invalid, and again, to use my language, you know what the technical term for that is? It's a piece of crap. In other words, it's nothing. It doesn't exist. It's as if it never existed. And since it never existed, his 1948 will was admissible. Yes? And that's what the court held. This wasn't written with testamentary intent. This wasn't valid as a will. It was valid as nothing. This instrument on page 197. This crap. And because it was crap, it's just as if it never existed. And he had the 1948 will. Or testator had to admit to probate. Testator was dead, but it was admitted to probate as testator's will. So the testator didn't die in testator. Notice, if you will, once again, we have a strong presumption against intestacy. The testator could die intestate if it was clear but the court, that he wanted to, but I think the court thought he didn't want to die intestate. All right, because that's the holding of the case, they never have to reach the dependent relative revocation issue. The implied conditional revocation, dependent relative revocation, DRR. I'll just say DRR, that's my abbreviation. And on the final exam, when I ask you a question about DRR, and I will, it always appears somewhere on the final exam, I'll spell it out. I won't say DRR, I'll say dependent relative revocation, but that's what I'll say. Dependent relative revocation rather than implied conditional revocation, because dependent relative revocation is the more, I don't know, maybe the more old-fashioned, but I think it's the more common use. Okay. That's the case. So what's the doctrine? Now, Ms. Meyer say, how would the court have to have faced, under what circumstances would the court have faced the doctrine of dependent relative revocation? 197, 198, it gives us the rule on dependent relative revocation, quoting page on Will's, top of 198. You're doing great. You're doing so great. No, you're giving me that, you just gave me that look like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. No, you do. You're doing great. Okay, this is a really hard case, and this is a hard doctrine. And I often say in this class, in this course, that, not just this class, but this course when I teach it, that I think many people feel this way too, that for the most part, the doctrines, the rules aren't very difficult. There are just so many, right? This rule is kind of difficult. I think a lot of people find this rule maybe to be the most difficult rule that we have to face in this class. So you're doing great, all that said. Okay. The court didn't have to face dependent relative revocation. If the court had held, let's try it this way. That instrument on page 197, they said, was nothing. I don't think they use the term piece of crap. I think that's my term. But it's just totally ineffective. It's as if that never existed. But you know, I kind of think the court got the case wrong. I think it did exist. I think it's totally in testator's handwriting, right? This correct? It's signed by the testator. See Lawson versus Dawson's estate, right? And so it doesn't make a testamentary disposition. Can anyone make an argument that it actually does make some testamentary dispositions or has some testamentary intent or testamentary effect? What do you think testator might have been trying to do here? The court said, oh, it's just a memorandum to himself to just make another will. I think it's more than that. I think the court was straining to keep him from dying intestate. I think it's more than that. What might it have been doing? What happened? How did testator's life change between 1948 and 1955? He got married. Okay? So what does this will say that might seem to arguably be testamentary in nature? What's he saying? He's actually saying something about some property that he owns.
I guess if we were to try to do
Well, maybe he wants to leave everything to his wife, but does a will have to dispose of all someone's property? If you can say, I leave all my real property to so-and-so and say nothing about personal property, and testator would simply, there'd be a partial intestacy, right? So there's a lot here, and what's he saying about this lot? It's his separate property, right? But what? And she invested some money in it. Therefore, he's trying to say what? That it's community property, that because it's community property, when he dies, she'll get her 1/2. Well, that actually has some testamentary intent, I think. But the court held that there was no testamentary intent. What does the States Code 22.034 say about a will? We talked about this before, 22.034. Yeah, I get you, and you're doing just a great job. Look on page 113 of the statutory supplement. It defines the term will. Will includes a testamentary instrument that merely, well, so look at subsection 2C. It merely revokes another will. I think this is a will. I think the court got the case wrong. I think this was written with testamentary intent. And the whole problem on page 197, the piece of crap, the subsequent writing said, this is my last will and testament, and I hereby revoke any and all other wills heretofore made by me. I think, in fact, it's a will under the Estates Code, and it is valid, and it does revoke his prior will, and now he dies intestate unless dependent relative revocation applies. The court didn't have to face this because they said it's a piece of crap. It wasn't written with testamentary intent, and the old will applies. But if the court would have to face the DRR issue if the court had held this was valid to revoke his will. So with that in mind, let's change history here. Say, court, we hold this 1955 or undated document that's post 1955. We hold this is valid. His will is revoked unless we apply DRR. Now, what is DRR, and should the court apply it? Does that help? No. That's okay. What's DRR? We'll get some help. So what is it?
Is it where you have a subsequent writing,
Okay.
that revokes the will but doesn't speak to any of the other provisions within the will?
Okay. Well, we could have that, though. I mean, if that's what testator really wanted, testator really wanted to die intestate, he could revoke the will, and he could have died intestate. Let me ask you this. Look at the notes on page 198. We'll come back to the case. We'll try it this way. What is the doctrine of dependent relative revocation? Oh, crap, that's what I've been asking for the last 15 minutes, right? Under what circumstances might it apply? Crap, again, that's what I've been asking. What are the policies behind the doctrine? Let's talk about the policies. Ms. Micey, you're so close. You're so close to it. What do you think the policies, Ms. Scroll, you can help her, what are the policies behind this doctrine? Implied conditional revocation. And then we'll get to the doctrine. I promise, I'm not going to leave you hanging. But
We assume the testator didn't want to die in testate.
Okay. Ms. Jones?
To the policy?
Yeah, what's the policy behind it?
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything so that, that the testator would not want to die intestate, and you wouldn't want to revoke the old will if the new will wasn't.
He wouldn't want to revoke the old will if the new will wasn't valid. Okay. Here is, okay. Ms. Anderson?
I was going to say that the court wants to further the testator's intention.
It is. It's a doctrine that's applied to further the testator's intention. That's certainly true. You're right about that. And you all are also close. You know the old, remember the old game Battleship? How many people remember Battleship? Right? Broadside. Okay, you're right. Those of you who played Battleship, broadside. I mean, you're right there. You haven't sunk the battleship yet, but you're right. Okay. Here's the thing. Dependent relative revocation. The usual kind of situation is this. Testator has will number 1, the 1948 will. Testator makes will number 2. And will number 2, maybe this 1955 instrument, right, revokes will number 1. But the usual situation, and this isn't the usual situation, the usual situation for DRR is where will number 2, revoking will number 1, is invalid for some reason. Testator made it by mistake. If they're made it based on a mistake of fact, some courts say mistake of fact, some courts say it has to be a mistake of law. I'm not really sure what it is in Texas, whether it's a mistake of law or fact. I'm going to say it's a mistake of law or fact. I'm going to give you some examples and some hypotheticals in a moment that I hope will make this all clear. So you got will number 1, valid. Will number 2, revoking will number 1 and making a different disposition of the property, invalid for some reason. It's invalid for some reason. Okay? And most likely, if will number 2 is invalid, if it was never valid, then it didn't validly revoke will number 1, right? So will number 1 is admissible for probate. Let's take it one step further. Let's suppose will number 2 that's invalid. Testator thinks will number 2 is valid, and testator tears up will number 1 with the intention to revoke it at the same time. Will number 2 is invalid. What happened to will number 1? Testator revoked it by physical act. Now, how does testator die? Intestate, unless we apply the doctrine of dependent relative revocation, applied conditional revocation, unless the court says, well, will number 2 isn't valid. Testator can't have will number 2. It's not valid. Why isn't it valid? Because I told you it wasn't valid. Get it on a final exam, don't argue with me. For whatever reason, it's not valid. Maybe there's only one witness. Maybe testator forgot to sign it. Maybe testator was temporarily insane. It was invalid for some reason. Okay? Testator can't have will number 2. But he's torn up will number 1 based on his mistaken belief that will number 2 was valid. So testator dies intestate unless we apply DRR. DRR would apply if the court thinks that testator would not have revoked will number 1 if he had known will number 2 wasn't valid. If he'd known that subsequent instrument wasn't valid, if the court believes that testator wouldn't have revoked will number 1, then the court will give testator will number 1. He's dead, he doesn't care, right? But the court will say testator's apparent revocation of will number 1 was conditional or dependent on will number 2 being valid, but will number 2 is not valid, and therefore to further testator's intent, the court will admit will number 1 to probate. Easy, simple, straightforward. What the hell did any of that just mean? I know. It's hard. I told you, this is the hard. I think this is probably the hardest doctrine that we're going to do. And the court didn't have to face it in this case, Burton versus Bell, because in Burton versus Bell, the court said that revoking instrument number 2 was not valid. Because it wasn't valid, will number 1 would never been revoked. See, testator didn't tear up will number 1. Testator had never validly revoked will number 1 unless that instrument number 2 was valid in Burton versus Bell. And it wasn't valid, so if they didn't have to face DRR, I think they should have. I think the second one was valid. And then the question is, was that second one somehow executed based on some kind of mistake so the testator really didn't intend to revoke will number 1? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it would have come out if the court had to apply DRR. Let's go ahead and do a couple more things. A couple more of these notes. Let me do some hypotheticals. Well, actually, let me stop and see if you have any questions first. And the answer might be, just wait a second, I'm going to be taking this up in a moment.
Where does the mistake of law and mistake of fact come in?
It's usually in that second instrument. Okay? But I'm going to do some hypotheticals that are going to, they're going to make it clearer. I hope it's not always the same. Okay? Usually it's the same.
Can I read what I think you said? Make sure it's
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Will 2 revokes Will 1 but is invalid. Then DRR would make Will 1 remains valid if court thinks the testator would not have revoked
Will number one.
unless Will 2 was in place.
That's right. Okay. In other words, if the court thinks that, they'll give testator will number one. If the court doesn't think that, they'll let testator go ahead and die intestate. Because testator has, say, torn up will number one, validly revoked it, and will number two that testator thought was in place isn't valid for some reason. They didn't have to face it here because the court just up front said, oh, that revoking instrument, will number two, which I think really is a will, which I really do think was a holograph, which I think was signed. They didn't have to face this tougher issue. They said, oh, that wasn't valid. That was as if that never existed. So, because it never existed, testator hadn't revoked will number one. I'm not really convinced of that. But that's what the court said. All right. Let me give you another definition of DR, another iteration of the rule. The rule, and you see, it's top of page 198 in the case Burton versus Bell. There's the rule from page on wills, right? Even where will may be revoked by subsequent writing other than a will or codicil, a will or codicil which contains a revocation clause together with dispositive provisions. Don't take it down, just read it with me and mark it in your book, okay? You can read it later because I'm going to give you something to take down in just a moment. In which is executed so as to be sufficient writing, but not as to be a valid will, does not operate as a revocation unless the instrument shows affirmatively that testator intended that such revocation. This is crap. How can you understand any of this? All right, there it is. Mark it. Now, let me give you another iteration that I hope is better. Okay, here goes. Get ready to take this one down. The DRR rule. If testator purports to revoke his will, if testator purports to revoke his will upon a mistaken assumption of law, some people say just law, some people say law or fact. I'm going to say law or fact. It can also be a mistake of fact. I'm going to give you an example of that in a moment. So if testator purports to revoke his will upon a mistaken assumption of law or fact, the revocation is ineffective. The revocation is ineffective if testator would not have revoked. The revocation is ineffective if testator would not have revoked his will had he known the truth. Had he known the truth. So, again, let me read it, and I'm going to annotate it. If testator purports to revoke his will number one, upon a mistaken assumption of law or fact, the revocation, the subsequent revocation, is ineffective if testator would not have revoked will number one had he known the truth, had he known he was making a mistake. Something was wrong in number two. So, here's the usual situation. Again, usual situation, testator has will number one, and he tears it up. He revokes it by physical act at the same time, as part of the same transaction of making will number two, which is going to replace will number one. Great, says testator. When I die, I know that will number two is going to be carried out, and I'm revoking will number one. I don't want will number one. It turns out that testator was wrong. Testator dies, goes to his great reward, and he was mistaken. Will number two wasn't valid for whatever reason. Now, will number two is not valid, and he's revoked will number one. Now he dies intestate unless DRR applies. The court will apply DRR to carry out his intent, carry out testator's intent. If they believe that he wouldn't have torn up will number one, he wouldn't have revoked will number one if he'd known will number two wasn't valid. It's just really a question of the court saying, what do we think testator would prefer? Do we think he'd prefer to die intestate because will number two isn't valid, he's revoked will number one, now he dies intestate? Or would we, the court, say, if testator had known that will number two wasn't valid, would we think he would have been happier with will number one than intestacy? That's it. What does testator prefer? Intestacy or will number one?
So if he cares about will number one, then how do they
Well, I mean, you get, how do we do? I could ask you that. I could ask you that on the final exam. And you know the answer because we covered that last week in class. How to probate a lost will. So I'm not going back over it again. Assuming we can prove it, we talked about burdens of proving lost will. We talked about the section. So just assume we can find it. Now, if we can't find it, if we don't know, if I'm God and I'm omniscient, and I know there's will number 1 out there, but I also know none of these people, none of the 6 or 7 billion people on the planet can find it. It never existed, right? So on a final exam, we'll be omniscient. I'll be God. That's right. And I'm grading it. I get to do those 2 things. I don't think I'm God. Please, don't get me wrong. I don't think I'm God. Just when I'm making up your final grade, right? And if I tell you that, don't start arguing with me. Just, take the facts as given. Yes, you're always going to have a proof problem. We talked about those proof problems last week. How do you prove up a lost will if we have the burden of proof? We did all those. All right. Yes.
So, is DRR way reviving will 1?
It's not a way of reviving will number 1. We don't follow revival in Texas. That's a great question. That's a great question, and it's kind of a natural kind of thing. We don't revive revoked wills. The court will disregard or ignore the revocation because they think testator made that revocation mistakenly believing that a subsequent dispositive instrument was valid when it wasn't.
So the way to bring back will 1 is not a way to enforce will 2?
That's exactly right. So there's no way to enforce will number 2. Let me give you let me tell you about Chuck E. Cheese. Okay? Chuck E. Cheese. And for those of you who have borrowed notes from friends from prior years, I tell this every year. Because one of my colleagues, Richard Gershon, who was the former dean here and a good friend and a wonderful colleague who taught this class for years and years and years, Richard used the Chuck E. Cheese examiner. When his girls are teenagers now, but when they were really small, when his first daughter was like 3 years old, he would say to her, "What do you want to do today? Do you want to go out to the park and play, or would you like to sit at home and watch some Disney Channel or something like that on TV?" And she'd say, "Chuck E. Cheese." She'd want to go to Chuck E. Cheese. That's not an option. Chuck E. Cheese wasn't an option. Your choices are play, go outside and play, or stay and watch TV. Chuck E. Cheese is not one of the options. So here it is, Mr. Marquez. Will number 1, or intestacy. We know what testator wants. He wanted will number 2. That's Chuck E. Cheese. He can't have it because it was invalid. Why was it invalid? I just told you it was invalid. Why? Because I told you, right? Just take my word for it if it comes up on the final exam, right? We've proven, we've demonstrated it's invalid. For whatever reason, it's invalid. You can't have number 2. That's Chuck E. Cheese. So, would he rather go out and play? That's intestacy. Okay, all right. I know these analogies aren't really the best, right? Would he rather go out and play in the park, intestacy, or would he rather stay at home and watch the Disney Channel, have will number 1, disregard that revocation? And we'll disregard that revocation of will number 1 if we think he would have preferred it to intestacy, that he wouldn't have revoked it at the same time he was executing will number 2, which wasn't valid. Okay, does that get it? Does that get it now? Is that better? Give me a look like, yeah, kind of. We're going to work through a couple of hypos, but I think that's going to make this clear. Okay? And you never know when a hypo like one of these might appear on a file or something fairly similar. Okay? All right. How about I do the hypos? And then if you still have questions, let me know. And trust me, if on the final exam, will number 1 will magically appear, even though he tore it up. Maybe he tore it in half very carefully and kept it or something like that, right? If it's burned up so no one ever knows it exists and it was holographic, so there are no witnesses, yeah, you're right. I don't know. It's a practical matter. You might not find it. But and that's a fair point. But just the final exam, don't argue with me if I tell you will number 1, right? Okay, here it is. Notes 3 and 4 bring up this point. Okay, testator, note 3. Testator had a will. No, you know what? Let's go. Let me give you an example. How about this? Testator executes a will in the year 2000. This is valid. No crap, I don't want to do this again. Okay, now I want to do this one, but I don't want to do it again. Okay, I want you to understand the doctrine before I start giving you exceptions or what the doctrine does. Okay, let's do this one. Okay, in the year 2000, let's we'll take you 2000. Testator executes a valid will, leaving all his property in A, B, and C, none of whom are related to testator, none of whom are testator's heirs. Okay? In 2002, testator executes, that's will number 1, right? A, B, and C. Testator number 2, testator executes will number 2, leaving all his property in A, B, C, and D. He adds D. Okay? Okay. Now, unbeknownst to testator, this will is invalid. But at the same time that testator executes this invalid will, he thinks it's valid, but this is Chuck E. Cheese. This is what he can't have. Okay? He tears up, he revokes number 1 by this blank. Okay? So now, what's the situation? So testator dies in 2004, survived by A, B, C, D, and also by H, who's his only heir at law who wasn't included in the will. Okay? He dies in 2004. If we don't apply dependent relative revocation in this case, will number 1 was validly revoked in 2002, and will number 2 was invalid. Testator thought it was valid, but was invalid. If we don't apply DRR, testator dies in testate, H takes everything, right? So we can apply DRR. You can't have will number 2, it's invalid. Chuck E. Cheese. You can't have that. This is going out and walking in the park, and testacy is walking in the park. But the court's having to choose between intestacy versus will number 1. And the court can apply DRR and say, testator would not have revoked will number 1 in 2002 if he had known that will number 2 was invalid. We wouldn't have revoked will number 1 in 2 if he'd known will number 2 was invalid. If testator feels that, if the court feels that way, if they think testator would prefer will number 1 to intestacy, then the court will ignore the revocation in 2002 of will number 2, of will number 1, when will number 2 was executed. Easy? Easy, simple. You have to be a moron not to understand it. No, it's hard. I know it's hard. I can tell. I can look at the mixture of fear and blank stares in your faces to know that this isn't getting there.
My question is this, as I understand it, this is something that the courts can apply?
They don't have to.
Isn't the ultimate, I guess in this case, I'll stop my question there and I'll figure it out.
Well, no, but look, I've got plenty more hypos where this came from. And because I have more hypos where this came from, my answer to your question is not, once you come back with your question. This is hard and I will test on it. I really want you to know this. And I think they tested on it once on the bar exam a few years ago. I don't know if it's coming up on the bar exam or not, but it could come up in real life. Okay, so in this case, let me just ask you. This is the choice: intestacy versus will number 1, going walk in the park versus watching television, but not will number 2 because that's invalid. That's Chuck E. Cheese. You can't have Chuck E. Cheese. All right. So which do we think testator would have preferred here and why? Assuming we can prove all these facts up, who's going to offer will number 2? Will number 2 is invalid, so it's going to be shot down. So who's going to offer will number 1 for probate? A, B, C, or D, right? A, B, or C. Sorry, D. You're out. You're in will number 2, and we know this is invalid. Okay, D offers will number 2 for probate. The court says it's invalid. Does that make you happy? Now, the question is, so A, B, and C come back and say, how about will number 1? H says, well, he revoked will number 1. A, B, and C says, yes, apply dependent relative revocation. Should the court apply dependent relative revocation? Sure it should. Why?
There are similar provisions in will number 1.
Will number 1 and will number 2 are similar, and H, the heir, is cut out of all of them. It's clear the testator doesn't want H to take because testator wasn't in will number 1, testator didn't have H in will number 1 or will number 2. He doesn't want intestacy. So it's clear that will number 1 is closer to will number 2, the invalid disposition, And if testator could have known that will number 2 was invalid, surely, based on these facts, he wouldn't have revoked will number 1 because he didn't want it tested. He didn't want H to take, because H wasn't going to take under 1 or 2. See that? All right, now this is good. Now we're starting to see it. All right. How about this one? Testator, page 198, note 3. Testator had a will leaving Blackacre to A. Subsequently, testator made another will without a revocation clause, leaving Blackacre to B. Let's stop right there. Valid will number 1, everything to A. Blackacre to A. Time 2, will number 2, no revocation clause, but it leaves Blackacre, everything, to B. Thereafter, testator tore up the second will with the intention to revoke it. Is A entitled to Blackacre? Is A entitled to Blackacre? What if, well, okay, you're shaking your heads no. Why not?
Well, because I would assume the second will was an implied revocation of the first.
The second will was an implied revocation of the first, and then testator tore up the first, revoked it by physical action. Okay?
Right, but
And neither A, and let me say, neither A nor B is related to testator.
yeah,
They're not going to be heirs at law.
but the second will, I believe, is valid, and I thought that this only applies to things that are.
I'm sorry, did I say testator tore up the second, right?
Yeah.
Okay? So the testator tore up the second will, okay, which was perfectly valid at the time it was written. Now it's been revoked. So what about the first will? Well, yes, what about the first will? What's the validity of the first will? It's not valid. We talked about this. We had a case last week that said that if problem 3, note 3, this is an unusual situation. I'm going to tell you, note 3 is an unusual situation. But in note 3, that second will was valid to revoke the first will impliedly. It could have been, it could by inconsistent disposition. It could have been expressly. Will number 2 could say, I leave everything, I hereby revoke my prior will, or all prior wills, and I leave everything to be. Okay, or I leave Blackacre to be. It's just as effective as if it had said that. Okay? So then testator tore up will number 2. So now it's been revoked. It was valid to revoke will number 1. So now testator dies intestate unless we apply dependent relative revocation. Dependent relative revocation to do what? What would dependent relative revocation do? Problem 3 on page 198. Neither A nor B is related to testator. H is testator's heir at law. Does testator want intestacy? It doesn't seem to be that way. But what does testator want? Will number 1's been validly revoked. Will number 2 has now been validly revoked. What does testator want?
Testator wants B not to get Blackacre.
Testator clearly, I think, wants B not to get Blackacre. So what do you think he might want? What if he wants A to get Blackacre? Revival? Can revival? We don't allow revival. A is not going to take Blackacre. A can't. Well, he didn't republish. Don't say it. Don't say it. You know that on the exam, that's a 0. Right? Don't say, because he didn't republish it, right? Yeah, I'm not saying what could he do. I'm saying what happens in this case. What does the court do? I'm sorry. What does the court do? In number 3. Testator dies intestate. In number 3. I think that's clear. He clearly doesn't want B to have it because B, he tore that one up. Okay? But he had validly revoked the first one. If he revoked that in the mistaken belief that somehow what? Clearly doesn't want B to take it. And it was revoked before. I don't know. Would he have not torn up will number 2? But then B would take it. He clearly doesn't want B to take it. I think number 3, held testator dies intestate.
So this is where I was trying to get at.
Okay, go ahead. Great.
I think it's valid. So you asked what the court do. I think the first answer to that question is does the court decide whether to apply the DRR? And then, if they decide to apply it, do they then decide how to dispose of the testator's
estate? Yes, I think you're right. I think they first decide, do they apply DRR? Yes. And then the question is, how are they going to dispose of testator's estate? But it's really one and the same. Once they've decided to apply DRR, then you pretty much know it. You know how it's going to be. The estate's going to be disposed of. But that's it, yes, I think you're exactly right. And they do that by comparing, what do they compare? Wait, just go out, one second. Note 4 on page 199. What's the most important fact which will increase the court's likelihood of applying DRR? What's the most important fact? We saw it right here. The hypo.
There was
Well,
a
the intent
mistake.
for what?
A mistake.
There's a mistake.
In
There's
fact,
testator's intent, but there's one single fact I think that's going to be the most important. They're more likely to apply DRR if what? Yes, if the dispositions are similar, how close are they? If the more similar they are to each other, the invalid one and the earlier revoked one, okay, the subsequent invalid one, how close are they, how similar are they, and how different are they from intestacy? The closer they are to each other and the further they are from intestacy, the more likely the court is to apply DRR. But even further apart they are from each other, and that's the problem in note 3 on page 198. A and B clearly doesn't want B to have it because he revoked it. It doesn't revive number 1. So the only question is, would he have, in note 3 on page 198, would testator have not torn up will number 2, giving everything to B, if he had known that that wasn't going to revive will number 1? I don't think so, because he tore it up and he clearly didn't want B to have it. Because he clearly didn't want B to have it, he's going to have to die intestate. There's no other way around it, I think, in question 3 on page 198. Okay? Let me do a couple more and see if we can get this. How about this one? Okay? Testator has a will that leaves $10,000 to A and the residue to B, the residuary estate to B. So will number 1, $10,000 to A and residuary to B. Later, time 2, testator executes a perfectly valid codicil. And the codicil says, I hereby revoke the $10,000 gift in my will to A because A is dead. Got that? Will number 1, $10,000 to A, residue to B. Codicil says, revoking the I hereby revoke the $10,000 bequest to A that was in my will because A has died. Both are valid. Both instruments validly executed. In fact, A is still alive at the time of the codicil, and T died, survived by A and B. Does A take the $10,000? Yes, if DRR applies. This is revocation based on mistaken fact. Okay? All right. DRR does not have to apply to a whole will. It can be one of the provisions in the will. It can be a testamentary disposition in the will. That's what I've just given you in this hypothetical. Okay? And it can be based on a mistake of fact. Both those instruments, the will that I just gave you and the codicil, were both valid. But testator executed the codicil under a mistake of fact. A mistake in belief, not about its validity, but a mistake in belief as to A still surviving or not. T thought A had died. A had not died at all. And in fact, survived T. Testator, the court could apply DRR to further testator's intent and give the $10,000 to A, ignore that subsequent codicil revoking the $10,000 gift in the will to A, if the court believes that's what testator would have wanted. The testator wouldn't have executed that codicil had testator known the truth, that was that A had not died, that A, in fact, was alive. Does that help? Or does that make it much worse? I'm sorry. Yeah, question? Oh. I know what you're thinking. I can't even form a goddamn question. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to curse. I apologize for that. Piece of crap is one thing. I didn't mean to take the word's name in vain. I apologize for that. You can't even think of a question. Okay, that's the bad news. The good news is this will be on the final exam. I've got to separate the A's from the B's somehow. Remember that, ladies and gentlemen. All right, now let me stop. I'll stop being mean right now. Okay, now I'll start again. No, I'll stop being mean for a second and ask, I'm still going to do another example or hypo or two. You want to hear another hypo? Okay, all right, another hypo. All right, how about this one? I don't know if this is going to make it better or worse. Testator has a valid will, and she writes void across the face of the will. Right across the face of the will with the intention to revoke it. So if we want to cancel this revocation, we have to do it on this partition, okay? All right, she doesn't burn it or anything like that, doesn't destroy it, okay? So testator writes void on the face of the will. She then asks her attorney to draft a new will for her. And the attorney prepares a new will, and testator has some changes. No, I did the draft of the new will. She hasn't executed the new will yet. And she says, I don't like this, I don't like this, and I don't like this. And the testator says, and the attorney says, fine, I'll make these changes for you. The testator leaves the attorney's office and is hit by a bus and killed on the way out. Okay? How about that? A thunderbolt. Zeus hurls a thunderbolt at him. Okay. Testator dies, survived by all the people who were in will number 1 and by testator's heir at law, who wasn't included in will number 1. Who takes and why? What do you think?
Let's say she died intestate.
I'm going to say she died intestate too. Why?
I got a couple different ones. I don't know which I'll try.
Come on.
One, she revoked it. She wrote it when there wasn't anything. So there's no mistake of law or fact.
And there's no alternative disposition, is there?
No.
She hasn't executed an alternative disposition, has she? She was willing to revoke will number 1 and risk dying intestate before will number 2 was prepared. That, I think, I think that, in that case, I don't think we have to say, well, was H, her heir at law, was H also in will number 1? I don't think so. I think she was willing, it shows her intention that she was willing to run the risk of dying intestate if she died before will number 2 got properly prepared and executed, and that's in fact what happened. We're going to give her a wish. She's going to her grave intestate. I think that's it. Do you have another explanation for that, or I think?
No, I think so. I'm thinking two different things, but they're both the answer.
Okay, great. A plus. No, that's it. Okay. Now, okay, but again, we go back to this one, and this one's really clear. This is what I put on the board. This is a classic situation. Will number 2, will number 1 is valid. Will number 2 is invalid. Okay, it would have revoked will number 1, but it's not valid. It's what we call a piece of crap. It's Chuck E. Cheese. You can't have it. Testator can't have that. Okay, and at the same time as executing will number 2, testator thinks will number 2 is valid. He tears up will number 1 with the intention to revoke it. Well, he can't have will. Then he dies. Well, testator can't have will number 2. The question is, does he want intestacy, or would he rather have will number 1? And the other hypos that I gave you, testator is probably going to die intestate because testator was willing to, well, the hypo we just did now, testator was willing to run the risk of intestacy. It's the same in note 3 on page 198. Testator was willing to run the risk of intestacy, and that's what happened. In note 3 on page 198, it's just we know that he didn't want B to take. You can't have A take. There's no revival. I think it's pretty clear that he didn't want B to take, and testator was going to die intestate. Note 3 on page 198. This is the usual situation, hypo number 1. Okay? Now, questions. I know you're out there. I can hear you breathing. Come on, someone's got a question. Oh, okay, all right. So I'm taking it that it's really clear. I could give you a 30-minute essay on this on the final exam. Don't do that, Alton. You'd be so mean. Give me one multiple choice question, maybe. All right, maybe I'll just give you one multiple choice question. If I'm in a bad mood, maybe I'll give you 2 multiple choice questions on this.
Are there any other factors other than the similarity of the wills?
It's what the court thinks testator's intention would be. And what would testator's intention be? Well, generally we're not going to know. Testator's dead, and he probably or she's probably not left notes around or something like that. Maybe, can we admit extrinsic evidence to apply DRR? Not only I think can we, I think generally we will. We're going to have a rare situation as my hypothetical number 3, which said, codicil, I hereby revoke that gift in my will because A is dead. Oh, now we don't have to take it. We see the mistake recited on the face of the will or the revoking instance. We usually don't see that as Foster. So I think we're just going to have to kind of guess what testator might have wanted and what's the single most important factor. I think it's how close disposition 1 that's been revoked is to disposition 2, which is invalid, and how dissimilar they are, how different they are from each other. But again, note 3 on page 198, H was the heir, everything to A, the time one. At time two, everything to B, validly revoking the gift to A, then validly revokes the gift to B. I think it's clear that he doesn't want B to have it. He can't revive it. There's no way the testator can revive it. Therefore, I think note 3 on 198 testator cannot revive it. And I don't know if I'm making this better or if I'm just repeating the same damn thing that you didn't understand before. It's like I'm speaking Greek. I can't tell. So, did that answer your question? Okay, thank you. What other questions can I answer now on this? What? Okay, all right. Maybe it's better. Maybe it's not any better. I know. Maybe it's not any better. I'm sorry. Think about it, and when we have our review class before the final exam, oh, that's right, we won't have one. But if we were going to have one, I would talk about this. But you know what you can do? You can always send me an email, of course. Or you can come visit me during my exam period office hours if this bothers you. I certainly know from past experiences that I always get a few questions during exam time office hours on DRR. So I hope I've done okay, but I'm not sure to get it.
Can I ask you a hypo, please?
Yes, ask me a hypo, please, and we'll see.
All right. Let's say here, one drawn up on the board, we change it a little bit, and he's got 4 areas of loss, A, B, C, and D. But in 2000, he executes the will and leaves it to A and B only. In 2002, he leaves it to C and D only. And the rest of the facts apply. So who takes in that situation?
I don't know. I'm going to ask you, will you do me a favor, please? Email that to me, and I might put that on the final exam. And I'll call it the Navarro question. And oh, you're so mean, Alton. Yes, I am. But no, do me a favor. I'm Superman. I'm going to fly around the world. I'm going to reverse this, okay? And I'm going to say no hypos. Send me that email, if you will, please. I'll take a look at it when I can really consider it, and then I'll send it out to the entire class, and I will answer it. And that'll be yet another hypo we have. That's the last hypo I'm going to answer, however. Okay? That's a good question. That's a perfectly good question. I just have to stop and think for a second. Okay, and I've got a lot more than I want to do. Yeah, I'm moving it on. Sorry. Then I'll stay around after class and answer your question. Okay, Chapter 6. We're finished now with Chapter 5. Chapter 6, Law Interpretation and Construction. I said I was going to get into this chapter, and I really want to get into this chapter tonight. If I have additional time at the end, I'll take your question. If I have time at the end, we'll look at your hypo. Okay? But I really do want to at least get a few pages into Chapter 6. The next chapter, this is assignment number 9, right? It is assignment number 9, will interpretation and construction. And the first question that Professor Beyer has on page 205 of the casebook. What does it mean to interpret or construe a will? Are these terms synonymous? Professor Beyer, and you may be wrong, because he's been doing this longer than I have. He says that will, construction, and interpretation are not the same thing. That construction, I guess, is a matter of law. The court construes the will as a matter of law, and interpretation, maybe there's a question of fact. I don't care. I'm not going to test you on the difference between interpretation and construction. Most courts and most commentators use the terms synonymously. Interpreting a will, construing the terms in a will, they use those terms interchangeably, and I'm going to use it interchangeably. So don't worry about the difference between interpretation and construction. So what did you just ask about? Well, wow, 205, Alton. Don't worry about it. When do issues of will, interpretation, construction arise, and who will raise them? What do you think about that one? Note 2. When would these come up, and who would raise them?
Probably when offered up for probate.
All right, probably when the will is offered up for probate, and who's going to be the one to raise it? Probably a contestant, right? Somebody says, no, don't interpret the will that way. Interpret it this way, which gives me more or includes me in the will as opposed to excluding me from the will. Why does somebody want to? It's either going to be a proponent or it's going to be a contestant or opponent of the will, and it's going to come up when the will is offered for probate. It's the disappointed beneficiaries, the people who, well, if we interpret it this way, I get something, but if we interpret it the other way, I don't get anything. That's going to be the person who's going to raise that issue. What rules of interpretation and construction have already been covered in this class? Can you think of some things that we've already covered in terms of construction or interpretation of a will? Sometimes we're not sure what the will means, or the testator hasn't provided for a certain situation, and default rules apply. Default common law rules or default statutory rules apply. What are some of those? Often they have to do with revocation, in whole or in part. What are some of the questions about interpretation that have already come up in this class, in this course?
About revocation or?
Can be revocation or 120-hour survival rule, right? What does it mean to survive? That's one thing. We've got a default rule, but the stater hasn't drafted around it. Yeah. What else? What does it mean to survive? That's one interpreting who survives. What other questions come up in terms of interpretation of construing a will or revocation of a will? For that matter? What? Divorce, right? Divorce revokes the will in part, right? Unless the will clearly provides otherwise, okay? Well, it's going to have to be pretty clear to draft around that default rule, but yeah, that's one of the things. What else?
Preterminated children?
Preterminated children is another one, that's right. Yeah, this testator provided for that preterminated child outside the will or inside the will, or at least mention the preterminated child, so it's included in or excluded from the gift. What else? Specific and general gifts, and when might that be an issue? Well, an ambiguity. We're going to talk about ambiguities in a moment, which we haven't talked about them yet. But what about specific and general gifts we've already talked about? Or specific gifts, let's say. You might have to interpret. Redemption, yeah, redemption. That's one situation. What else? We have to interpret the. Yeah, DRR, sure. That's a classic example. That's where we have to interpret the revocation. What did testator intend when testator revoked the will? Right? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. There may be others, but those are some. Lapsed gifts might be another one, right? The testator intended the anti-lapse statute to apply or not. So there are a number of situations where we already have to construe the will or circumstances surrounding the will or provision in the will or revocation of the will that we've talked about. But now, in Chapter 6, we have to construe the will itself. What the heck do these words that are on the page mean? And the first doctrine on page 205 is ambiguity. It's a patent ambiguity. I'm going to talk, there's just like one short paragraph there, and I've got like half a page of notes on it. So I've got a lot more to say about patent ambiguity than Professor Byron has to say. A patent ambiguity is one that's apparent from the face of the will itself. We don't have to resort to extrinsic evidence outside the will to show that this is an ambiguity. You can see it from the face of the will itself. It's not that common. But let me give you an example. Testator's will says, I leave my blank, and I'm going to fill in the blank in just a moment, to my son. Yes. I do this one every year. Okay? I leave my J.P., comma, E to my son, duly executed. It's attested, it's totally valid. On the face, you can tell, what the heck does that mean? That's an ambiguity. You don't need to resort to extrinsic evidence to see that that's ambiguous. That's a patent ambiguity. And the rule is, the old common law rule was that extrinsic evidence was not admissible to clear up or resolve a patent ambiguity. Old common law rule was, son, leave this to my son, S took nothing, because we couldn't figure out what that was from the face of the will. That was the old rule. That's not the rule anymore. The rule now is admit extrinsic evidence to show what testator meant by J.P., comma, E. I use this one every year. I'm kind of proud of it. What did testator mean by J.P., comma, E? Look at your keyboard. What does testator mean? Home. That's exactly right. Testator's hand was off by one letter, right? Put in the home position. I leave my home to my son. Okay? So, if this came up, extrinsic evidence modernly today would be admissible to show what testator meant, and son could take the old days, run the clock back 100 years certainly, maybe even 50 years, extrinsic evidence was not admissible to clear up or resolve patent ambiguity. Patent ambiguity is one that's clear from the face of the will itself. We don't need extrinsic evidence to show that it's a mistake, to show that it's an ambiguity, that this doesn't make sense. If we can see that from the face of the will, then we can admit extrinsic evidence to show, to clear it up, to resolve, to see what the testator meant. Okay? Now, what if it's not this easy? What if there's a patent ambiguity, there's a terrible typo, and we don't know what testator meant? No one has the notes, no one has anything. Oh well, S might not take anything, right? We still have to prove the extrinsic evidence is going to have to be brought forward. S, the proponent, is still going to have to show, oh, this is what your old dad intended. If you can show that, extrinsic evidence is admissible to clear up that patent ambiguity. Okay? Now, Professor Beyer asks, what if the patent ambiguity consists of a blank space? Testator said, my blank this. You never filled it in. Was it a mistake like that? It just was blank. By mistake, he hadn't filled it in. Do you think extrinsic evidence is admissible to show what the testator intended? Held? No. That case held? No. It said, the case said extrinsic evidence of the testator's intent at the time he executes his will, while admissible to explain an ambiguity existing in the will, is not admissible to supply an entirely omitted bequest. Court held, this isn't an ambiguity, this is simply omitted. This isn't like this at all. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm not so sure. The court was pretty sure about that. I'm not so sure that's not so clear. But you can see, this could be easily resolved. This one, you can put anything in the world in this, right? I mean, this could open the door, and that's what the courts are worried about. So, no, this is not a patent ambiguity. Extrinsic evidence is not admissible to clear that up. S doesn't take anything out of that request.
Trying to figure out if this says that try to get 75% to different people on these states. Would that fall under this category? 75% A, 75% B. I give away 150%.
That might fall under this category. I think that probably would. I mean, it might be. I don't think it'd be latent because I think you can see it from the face. Now, how's a patent ambiguity different from a latent ambiguity?
Latent ambiguity, I'm assuming, is something that we have to have extrinsic evidence to show.
You have to have extrinsic evidence to even show that it's an ambiguity. It looks clear on the face of the will. 75%, 75%. You can see on the face of the will that that's an ambiguity, that's a patent ambiguity. So I think that would fall. Your hypothetical would fall in that. And then I think that's an easy one to clear up. Oh, he meant that these people take equally. It's only 50-50. We can clear that one up pretty easily. I think that'd be a pretty low burden of proving that one. So, all right. That's patent ambiguities. Now, latent ambiguities, we talked about it. The Cohorn case defines it middle of 209, a latent ambiguity, defect which does not appear on the face of the language used or of an instrument or an instrument being considered. It arises when language is clear and intelligible. It looks clear on its face and suggests but a single meaning, but some intrinsic fact or some extrinsic evidence, extraneous evidence, creates a necessity for interpretation or a choice between two or more possible meanings. It seems perfectly clear on its face, but when we go to apply it, we can't apply it because either nothing fits what seems clear in the will, or because two things equally fit. And the rule, as you see in the Cohorn case, page 209, bottom of the page, quoting from a Supreme Court case, U.S. Supreme Court case, settled doctrine as a latent ambiguity is only disclosed by extrinsic evidence, it may be removed by extrinsic evidence as well. Okay? So that's the rule. Okay? Extrinsic evidence is and has always been admissible to both disclose, discover the latent ambiguity, and to clear it up. It wasn't true of patent ambiguity. A common law patent ambiguity was not subject to being cleared up by extrinsic evidence. Modernly, the modern rule, the rule that I'm going to test you on, is that extrinsic evidence is admissible to clear up, to resolve both a patent ambiguity and a latent ambiguity. Both patent and latent extrinsic evidence is admissible to resolve both of them. What was the extrinsic evidence? I mean, what was the latent ambiguity in the let's go back to the Holtquist versus Ring case on page 205. What was the latent ambiguity there? And then I'm going to ask the latent ambiguity in the Cohorn case. Everything seems clear on the face, but there was That's right. It's at the top of page 206, and the court said the testator made numerous specific requests. Is the court right there? Are these specific requests? These are general requests, aren't they? We'll leave that aside for a moment. Those are general requests because it's not specific. It's an amount of dollars. It's general pecuniary amount that's given, not say a specific item. And he said David, Alvin, and Alma Ring, the last three named being children of my sister Annie Holtquist Ring. Okay. On its face, it looks clear. It looks like Annie has three children, David, Alvin, and Alma, who are named here. As Ms. Maisi correctly says, Alma was his sister, another sister, a sister that was put together to show he hadn't spoken to in years. And in fact, that his sister Annie had three children, David, Alvin, and Elmer, not Alma, and he wasn't a native English speaker. And a couple of years ago in this class, I actually had a native Swedish speaker in this class. Some of you know Joachim Soderbaum, who's a former editor-in-chief of our large, as nice a person as you could find. And his English is perfect. But he grew up speaking English, but Swedish is his primary language. He said, oh yes, Alma and Elmer would be very hard. I can hear the difference, but it would be very hard for a Swedish speaker to hear the difference. And apparently, the testator in this case, his name was Otto Holtquist. Otto Holtquist apparently didn't read English that well, so he was used to having things read to him, so he might not be able to hear this mistake, not be able to hear the difference. So, extrinsic evidence was admissible to show that there was a latent ambiguity here, that Alma Ring was not a child of Annie Holtquist Ring, and that, in fact, he intended Elmer Ring, who was a child of his sister Annie, to take, rather than his other sister, Alma, to take. Okay. And the court allowed addition back to together. Okay. What about the state of Cohorn? What was the ambiguity in that case? Nice, you're doing great tonight. Thank you.
In the bill, paragraph 3 provides a tract of land that does not exactly exist.
That's right.
But it was similar to two other tracts, one of which is fully owned and one is fully in part.
That's right. So it was said, his will said, tract 81 in League 277. And he either owned in whole or in part tract 82 in 277 or tract 81 in 278. Okay? So on its face, it looks clear. But when you went to apply it, nothing fit that definition. He didn't own tract 81 in League 277. So extrinsic evidence would show that there was a mistake, a latent ambiguity. You couldn't tell it from the face of the will, and extrinsic evidence was admissible to clear it up, to show what the testator really intended. The same thing or the same kind of situation that we had in Holtquist. So Holtquist and Cohorn are situations where the will describes something, a person or a thing, but no person or thing exactly in reality fits that description. Okay, there was no in Holtquist, there was no person named Alma Ring who was his niece, who was the child of his sister Annie, right? Alma was his sister, not his niece. Elmer was his nephew, was the child of his sister Annie. So there's no person or thing that exactly fit that description. Alma being a child of my sister. The same thing in Cohorn. There was no he didn't own, there may have been tract 81 in League 277, but he didn't own it. He owned tract 81 in 278 and tract 82 in 277. So the court took extrinsic evidence to discover those latent ambiguities and to clear up those latent ambiguities as well. Now, there is another more common, less common actually. That's the most common one, okay? There's another less common type of latent ambiguity, and this is called equivocation. And let's give you an example. Equivocation. And in equivocation, there's a description in a will that clearly refers to one person or thing. But when you go to apply it, in fact, instead of the opposite of Holtquist and Cohorn, when you went to apply it, there was nothing that fit that. Here, two or more things or people fit that description. And the court has to choose which one did testator intend. So, for example, let's say testator's will says, I leave my vacation home in New Mexico to my friend Jane Smith. My vacation home in New Mexico to my friend Jane Smith. Seems clear on its face. Now we go to apply it. Turns out testator had two vacation homes in New Mexico. He also had two friends named Jane Smith. Which takes which one? Okay, that's equivocation. It's not like Holtquist or Cohorn where we go to apply it and nothing fits it. Here, two or more things fit it. And we have to take extrinsic evidence. That's a latent ambiguity also. And the court will take extrinsic evidence to clear it up to show what testator intended, which person was intended to have which thing. Okay? He might have said my vacation home in New Mexico to my friend Jane Smith, and in fact, he had one vacation home in New Mexico. He had two Jane Smiths as friends. Which one takes? Extrinsic evidence is admissible to clear up that equivocation. Note 3 on page 210. My note, and we're out of time, so let me just say quickly, my note to myself is, this is self-explanatory. Okay, so read that note, note 3 on page 210. But I'll say, do you agree with the court that this was an ambiguity? I'm not so sure that, in fact, this was ambiguous. I don't know. The court said that this was ambiguous, and they applied interpretation here and saw what the way testator used this. I'm not so sure this was an ambiguity. I think the court might have been able to do this as a matter of law. I'm not saying which way they took that down. Just look at note 3 on page 2. So, with that in mind, I'm sorry, I'm out of time, and I kept you over a minute, so I owe you a minute next time. We'll start on page 210, no apparent ambiguity, and go through those rules, and I will stay around to answer questions that you have. And Mr. Navarro, if you want to send me that as an email, or I'll just, we can take it now and puzzle it out. You've got 5 minutes, and then I can send an email to class or raise that on Thursday. Okay? Thanks.
Someone be around the screen slide? Oh, yeah.
So, who do you think might have? I asked a few people here. Do you know if anyone might have a recording of this last class?
I don't. In fact, I don't know if I know anyone else that does recordings.
Yeah, I don't think it's popular. You think it would be, right?
You think it would?
Yeah.
Mistaken belief.
Mistaken fact.
I saw this diagram that was showing the most popular Halloween candy by state in Arizona. It was so fun. And then we went everywhere else, like,
Oh, wow, what is this?
It was so fun. Everywhere else was really fun in the middle.
So this is Swedish?
I think it's Swedish.
So that means it might not pronounce Elma or Elmer.
Okay, what's funny is in my family, my great grandfather was Elma West, but everyone, Elma West.
Mm-hmm.
With an A. Everyone pronounced it Elmer, but not me. And my mom was always talking about that, but I wondered if they were like, I don't know if it was Swedish, but if they had like everybody original language.
This is really good, man.
Concio.
Can I take another one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like
Is that okay?
6
I
of
feel
these
bad.
for like $5.50. In fact, you can have the whole thing if you
No,
want.
no, no, I don't want it.
Because there's
It's not
5 more of
helpful.
those at home.
Really?
And,
You got it for a good deal.
yeah.
No. You sure you don't want it? Oh, it says Switzerland here. They might pronounce Alma. So did your family pronounce Alma correctly?
I mean, his name was spelled Alma, but they pronounced it Elmer.
Oh.
It was my great-grandfather, and I never met him. He's already dead before I was born. My great-grandmother was still alive. She was 103 when we met.
I met actually my great grandmother as well. It was pretty.
Really?
It's connection. She was born in like 1899, December 2nd. So I met someone born in the 1800s.
Yeah. I think mine was born 18. I mean, she was 103 when she died sometime in the 80s.
Whoa.
So it had to have been 1886. No. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? You know, if you think about it, it really wasn't that long ago. I mean, it's just like a generation or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bananas. Yeah. I mean, like, World War II wasn't even that long ago, you know? It's just like, a lot of people. You know what's funny? So, you know, Winston Churchill was born in like the 1870s, and he passed away when like the Beatles were popular. The Beatles were popular. That is just, it's unbelievable. Yeah, and Bertrand Russell, the philosopher mathematician, he was born in the 1870s, and he passed away like at 100 in 1973. Oh man, that's just, and he met the Beatles, and at the same time he was like friends with.
You're like, your point of reference.
Yeah, the Beatles, right? But I mean, and he met a person who met Napoleon. Yeah, isn't that? I think that's the same for Churchill. They met people who met Napoleon.
Were they Rothschild? The people that they met?
I don't know. They might have been diplomats or something. I mean, I guess they were in those circles, but.
Yeah. I just laughed because Rothschilds made their money when Napoleon lost that war because they bet all of their. They bet that the bank. They bet that England would lose.
Mm-hmm.
They had somebody report back that Napoleon had won, and everyone sold their stock in the Bank of England. They bought everything at cheap.
Oh.
And then got word that they won, and so that was how they made all their fortune, or a large part of their fortune.
Yeah, that's funny.
Crazy.
I read a lot of the article about it.
It was, you know, they had to have money to make money. The original fortune was made by whichever was back in the actual British ghettos.
I should look into that. Rothschilds are.
Interesting history.
Yeah.
Like, they were hiding from, I'm trying to remember what country they were in initially. They were being taxed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what era, but they were.
Banking, maybe, or.
I think it might have been accounting. Or accounting was involved, and they were hiding their money from being taxed, was the point. And so he saved up enough where he
Moved to England?
ended up, no, this is prior to that. Like, much older.
Like 1600s, or?
Let me look it up.
Yeah, I'm interested.
I know. Yeah, it's frustrating that I can't remember. Might even
Nathan Mayer.
Jewish German. So, no, he would have been the son of the original mayor of Rothschild. maybe even before cycle.
You can stop on it when I like those office hours.
Yeah,
Sometimes I put a sign up saying I'll be back.
Born in
So if
1744,
you want to,
Jewish ghetto in Frankfurt, Holy Roman Empire. That's what I thought, because it was the Roman taxation.
Yeah. Well, supposedly the whole. Yeah. Because I don't know.
As much as it existed in whatever, the entity to which I refer.
I think Voltaire said it. It was neither holy nor Roman.
That's right. Yeah,
Well, he did good for his family, I guess. That's pretty incredible.
Personal supplier of coins to the Prince of
And I
Hesse.
gave you a hypothetical like that as well. Number 3, it's not, appears to have been, not the second one was invalid, but that when you vote the second
Dealer in
one,
rare coins.
the first one could revive the first one. That was a mistake. Couldn't revive the first one. So the question is, did we ignore the revocation?
Yeah, this is the later generation. But this is the one that did what I was with Napoleonic. Napoleon invaded Hesse and was conquered Wilhelm for Prussia.
Number 1's valid, number 2's invalid for some reason. Votes number 1.
So I guess he was around for.
The other thing is the hypothetical. Number 2 is perfectly valid. It's based on the same thing, right? Right. Remember, I give I revoke the $10,000 gift to Ed. Perfectly valid revocation because A is dead.
Tracing it back.
How is that Tesla?
No, I'm not.
Oh, it's not mine. But yeah, actually no, it is. Would you like one?
No, I can't have anything. No, but is it like mixed in with the chocolate? The honey and the mixed?
That's what it tastes like.
It's just mixed in. It's
Yep.
not like a Snickers where it's like coated and matching and matching.
It's got nougat in it, is that what it says?
Is that the regular one?
Huh.
I thought they were just
Nougat.
chocolate.
It's just chocolate, but it's got these little dots in it, like it's a crunch, kind of, little crisp.
Because I've had one, it's just been so long. I was like, I don't recall it.
I think this is
No, it
my
doesn't taste nougat.
first time.
How much
I have to pass the
calories are in
Rubicon.
that? Like the whole, yeah, they're expensive too.
So serving size is 1/3 per bar, and it's 180. So 180 times.
180 times 3.
So it's 18 times
For the whole
3.
bar.
Yeah, for the whole bar.
Yeah, well, how many squares is a third?
600 calories.
How many triangles is in there?
A little less than that.
About 3. It says a serving per container about 3.
And how many triangles is it divided into?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, this is
It's
What,
really
no.
9.
Yeah, it might be.
Maybe it's 9.
Maybe
Do you know how many triangles reside within this?
Infinite. Next question.
It's like Schrodinger's cat, right? You should write it. You should write.
10 to 12.
Hey, so you're a
12
chemist,
probably,
right?
so maybe it's 4.
I used to be.
So you should write about Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah, no, we already looked at that. That's the ratio of the
Like
whole
an
bar,
evil
not
scale.
how many triangles per ratio.
So it's like Schrodinger's cat. There really might not be.
The right answer. Or
There's no
There-
triangles
there's
until
no
you pull it out.
Yeah.
Until you maybe several concurrent.
So it's like we need to find an analogous legal doctrine, and that'd be a great law review title. The law of Schrodinger's
Rule of capture.
rule of capture.
Schrodinger's
Schrodinger's
cat applies to law.
Oh, guess what we talked about today?
Okay, now that we're well trained, now we'll go
Good evening.
Said Monday or 15.
Well, we were actually talking
I'm not sure.
combination doctrine,
Can I
correlative
entice you to a
groundwater.
study group?
I'll try to make it there.
Yeah.
I will. I promise.
Shall I send you the formal digital input?
And your,
That'd be nice. Maybe with
It's not an
time.
e-card. It would be a text message.
I really like e-cards, especially the animated ones. They're really cool.
Is that your price? Is
They're
that your?
I'm Charles.
You're the one with the article that Brent wrote about the combination
I've been
doctrine.
told that.
It is
Ralph
cake
Coyote,
that
like
whole
ranch
He likes the term
took up over the summer.
As do
And
I thought you were
they've
telling
already been filing
me.
image briefs for
Because I
like
read
probably
that. Oh my God.
doctrine of like published.
Okay, yeah,
But
so that's much.
Can we start calling him Prince Charles?
Prince Charles? Yes,
There's
Prince Charles II. I'm just kidding. I'm actually, I'm really the fourth, but yeah. Because there was King Charles the First, right? And there was King Charles the Second.
And then they put all
No,
the
no, no.
stuff at the top,
Charles.
rid as opposed to.
And then there was me,
And
right?
there was Ray Charles.
Yeah.
So then the question is then, that much
V
line
for
oil
Vendetta,
gas,
right?
or are we going down
V
the
for
whole
Charles.
track and going back to
Victor.
oil and gas and all of
Oh, remember,
The 5th of,
Ranchers.
no, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgotten.
we need to watch that movie.
Small,
You
in
think
2 days.
that much is,
Yeah.
basically that it's interfering with their correlative rights.
Maybe
The accommodation doctrine ought to apply.
No, you can't wait. So,
I do have the TV.
Actually, I don't know what they did, but it's actually, you know
we
what,
could
I
just
think
watch,
in terms of the lease, they put something in
Symphony
because
Tchaikovsky's
of the way the
1812
lower
Vesper
court
Train.
decided it, now it's being taken up, and so the question is, are they going to
Yeah.
actually
Well,
deal
we
with
could
the
go to the
accommodation
symphony.
doctrine, or are they just going to,
Do you play any instruments?
that they can interpret
I have a
somehow the
guitar.
terms to,
Well,
I'm a traveler of both time and space. That's my answer.
I can,
Like they could almost just not.
we just,
I
I
think
could
they'll
get
find it,
some
yeah.
musicians to play an arrangement, you know.
With a guitar and a French horn and a triangle.
Oh, yeah.
And those can be the cannons.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing, are they, even by
Yeah.
saying that, are
It
they saying,
basically sounds like a
basically,
canon
is
sound.
there a dominant estate? Because right now, there's not one.
15th and New Year.
Well, wait, what's going on the 15th of May?
Well,
Well, I should think that this Sunday would be coming sooner than the 15th.
It's
Yeah.
not relevant.
So not next Sunday?
That just on the face of it. The whole this next thing. I use the term this to mean the soonest coming one.
Right.
Next one is the one after that.
Okay, yeah. So this Sunday,
Yeah.
Is not. It'd be next.
you don't want to,
I mean, we could do it. Just you and me. The other is, you can use it.
that's okay.
But I would rather sooner than later.
Yeah, sooner is better.
I'm crap studying on my own.
Then reasonable use of the surface comes in,
May
and
I
then you're talking,
attempt
Burger and
what's reasonable, or who determines?
I got a picture of someone
Or is it
having an
the
upset face.
estate? What is it that
So-
determines in that sense
Okay,
what's
yeah.
reasonable?
I guess that's your wife.
girlfriend.
Girlfriend. Oh, my wife.
No.
What class are you taking next semester?
Taking LAW3, estate planning and drafting. Fiduciary or trustee fiduciary responsibility, evidence, law practice management.
But I think unless it's in the terms of, I don't know, but what if it's the other
Last,
way?
we may not
Then
land in the
you
same
do have
class.
reasonable rights, and you don't.
Because otherwise you're limiting.
Doing secured transactions, preparing for the bar.
You don't need that.
Well, I haven't taken a lot of bar classes. That's my
That's fine.
worry.
So many hours you have. Well, you just registered yesterday. Did you
Yes.
get everything you wanted?
Right, that's why I think
Was it
they'll
7
end
o'clock
up
in the morning?
doing, but I don't know that it's
Yes.
not going to have some
I
implications.
have a record of waking up at 7 for a class.
Coyote Lake ran.
So secure transactions.
Preparing for the bar, state and local trade barriers, and the other one's kind of up for grabs, but hopefully it'll be a bar class.
But I think that's what they'll do is punt it either way, but yeah,
You already had it.
I kind of feel like
That's
it's
good.
interesting to see how they say it. Well,
I got
on the
it.
contract, like just say that you had to
I'll
leave
say that
and
I visited
you
the
termed
professor
it or did not
after
have
every
relevance
single class.
and interpreted as a contract.
What?
Pretty well.
I visited the professor after every
But
single
there's
class,
no
confirmed every
writing
single
we can
rule
read about it,
with a hypo.
then
Do you need an outline?
they must
I would
have,
love one
I
back
mean,
here.
Yeah.
they could
In
come
fact,
out a way
I would
that
love
really
all of your outlines.
like Kaiser
Yeah.
wrote into the amicus brief.
That would be
on
difficult,
the
but I can do it
Ranger
if we have a
side.
really fast computer, a fast internet connection.
A lot of it had to do with correlative rights and how we should recognize that for
Ideally not mine,
Relative
because it doesn't really fit
relative.
those criteria.
Yeah.
But there's
There's
a
a
lot.
rancher's relative right to enjoy the water right that they just sold. What relative right?
Now you've got me confused. I'll have to look it
Sunday.
up again.
I'll aim for Sunday.
This Sunday or next Sunday?
Both. But I'll keep you updated
Correlative
in
right
case
being
things.
that
Cool.
Yeah.
Fair use. I'll make sure that Danielle keeps it around. Uses are fair.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
sure I'll
Well,
use use my mineral
yeah, if you're
right
destroying
water.
the,
Yeah.
the use of the surface.
Nice book.
So it's a different concept. So relative right to use the surface.
Oh, here's my.